I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. and creating good board games is hard. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone watching this video. Creating a good board game, a board game that stands out, is hard. But there's something interesting. There's a conversation I was having a while ago with a friend that I thought would make for an interesting topic to go into. Because there's something interesting about the nature of creation. And this applies almost certainly to other industries as well, but it definitely applies within our board game hobby, which is why I'm talking about it. And it's the nature of the dichotomy between what small creators and large creators bring to the space and the different challenges they face that make creating good board games so hard. Now, don't get me wrong, we obviously have fantastic games that come out every single year, but then again, 7,000 to 8,000 games come out a year right now, and from those, only a few hundred at most become evergreen titles that are worth being reprinted and getting that buzz, that hype that people are really going crazy over. There's a whole bunch of great games that come out every year, but only a few really make it through to that next step. And again, even a 500-600 very good games out of 7,000 to 8,000 is still hard numbers. There's different challenges that face different creators at different points that make it so hard to create a good board game. And I think that there's generally kind of three phases to different creators. There's small creators, there's big creators, and then there's premium indie creators, premium small creators, which we'll go ahead and cover what that means. Small creators are exactly what you would expect. It's someone who sat there and decided, I want to make a board game. I'm passionate about the hobby. I have an idea. I don't just want to play them. I want to create something. And so they come up with their idea and then they bring it, usually to crowdfunding in some sense, but they try to make their game a reality. Now, don't get me wrong. You could have creators who try to work with a company to try to sign their game. That happens as well. And that does have opportunity for, well, we'll get into that when we talk about large creators, because I'm focusing on who's making the game, not who the designer of the game is. When you have a small creator producing, publishing the game, they're often bringing their passion to life in one way or another, but they're doing so without the resources of being an established company. Their playtesting resources might be lacking compared to a more established company. Their budget for art or components is likely going to be more limited. Their ability to know what factory to get certain things and what the process should be and how to most optimize their bang for the buck is going to be more limited. Their print run size and therefore their pricing, those are going to be things that hold them back as well. Sometimes you just have to pay more for a game from a smaller creator, even though what you're actually getting is similar to what you get from a larger creator, but smaller order quantities means you have to pay more just for them to break even, let alone make money. And these are all challenges that a smaller creator faces when they're trying to bring their project to life, or someone else's project, whoever the designer is, they're trying to bring this thing to life, and they're doing so without a lot of the opportunities that are more present once you are more established, have an audience, and are a larger creator. And so you might have the best idea for a board game in the world. You may be working with a designer who has a real gem on his hands, but these are all things that get in the way of your ability as a smaller company to bring that game to life. And again, to be very clear, we still do have great games coming from small, medium, and large companies at all points, but these are just the reasons why some of these things are hard. Because the flip side of that is you then hopefully achieve success. Let's pretend you are a creator, smaller company, you put out a few games, you got a few bangers, you got a good audience, you have a reputation, and now you start to hire and grow, and you are starting to put out bigger games. At that point, you have different challenges, entirely different challenges than a small creator, but challenges that also get in the way of creating great board games. The first challenge is that as a larger company, your board games need to be profitable. Your company needs to be profitable. You can't slave away for a year and a half on a passion project that you walked away with pocketing $4,000 after all the time and effort, energy you spent on that. You spent, thousands of hours of your life for a few $1,000s in order to just bring your idea to life. Larger companies don't have that bandwidth. They have to make games that are inherently profitable, so the numbers just have to be different from the get-go. Staff has to be paid. Once you start hiring people, you're now responsible for other people's jobs and other people's salaries, and that puts a different pressure on a larger company. A smaller indie creator bringing their passion project to life can spend 3 years on a single game that they make $10,000 on, and while they may not call it a success, it could be a hobby combined with something that they bring it to life and they hope to take it to the next level. But when you are an established company, you now need to put out games on a regular basis. You need regular recurring revenue to pay yourself, to pay your employees, to pay for everything that you're doing. And so you suddenly lose a lot of the pressures or blockages that got in the way of a smaller creator. You have better playtesting, you have a better budget for art, you have more reliable knowledge of what you can produce, how you can get it more optimally. There's a lot of things, lots of doors open for you once you have that structure in place and that fan base and that reputation. But you now have to put out 3 games a year, or you won't be able to continue to sustain your company, unless of course you survive with a whole bunch of evergreens. But otherwise, you have to continuously put out new games. When you have that game in front of you that you're like, we still need a little bit more polishing, it still needs to be a little bit more, sometimes you can't afford to make that decision because you have timelines. You have to put out 3 to 4 games a year, different amounts depending on the company size. You have to put out X number of games a year because people rely on that to happen for their income. So you have the resources, but you lose that sense of, I'm just going to make this perfect thing that I'm passionate about. You have to seek out the opportunities to get new games. You have to court designers to find games so that you can make them. It's no longer about how can I make this thing that is amazing. It's I must make something. Let me find the things that will work in order to put them out. And again, similar to small creators, big creators still put out great games all the time. But there is a reason why so many games will come out from a company and you'll be like, oh my gosh, yeah, company X, they have 20 games and I like 3 of them. That will happen because there's only so much you can guarantee that you have a massive hit on your hands when you have to put out games on a regular basis in order to ensure that people are buying them and bills are being paid. The third category I find the most interesting. The third category is almost premium indie creators. And I'll just give a handful of examples because I think you'll understand what I mean when I give you a few examples in the space. But we have companies like Chip3 Games, Ivy Studios, Shadowborn Games, Orange Nebula. These are all companies that have very few titles under their name, relatively speaking. They're not, large companies, Arcane Wonders, Renegade Games, Simon. They're not these large companies that have tons and tons of games. Chip3, from those ones I mentioned, Chip3 might be the largest with 8 or 9 games. Ivy Studios has somewhere in that range. Shadowborn Games has 1 published game and 1 coming up. Orange Nebula has 2 to 3 games. These are companies that they don't have a ton of games under their belt, but I also wouldn't call them tiny, small startups. They've managed to achieve some degree of critical success around their games, and often they have very passionate audiences that love everything they do because they put a lot of time, effort, and energy into these things. They've managed to build a brand, build an idea and a reputation, but you'll notice there is one commonality around all of those 4 companies I mentioned, and there's multiple others as well. These are just 4 that came to mind. The other commonality, the main commonality, is all their games tend to be premium and expensive. Great, sure, they're great games. Overall, these games, all the companies that I mentioned, they have games that overall are very well rated. Chip3 Games, interestingly enough, is starting to dabble in the lighter side of the market with games like 20 Strong and Tanglewoods. But for the most part, these companies' games are all expensive and very premium. And I think that's because in order to sustain that premium indie creator, you effectively have to put out games that are more expensive in order to sustain your entire company on works of passion that you only have to put out a few, not as many as a larger company that has to just continue to pump out game after game, and you're able to survive on greater margins by putting out effectively premium works of art and not just here's a $40 game, and to make those numbers work, we have to put out 7 a year. Maybe we only have to put out 2 games a year because they're $100 more premium experiences, that there's a lot more in it, but there's a lot more to it and the cost of it as well. Premium indie, in my opinion, premium indie creators is really where you can most thrive while maintaining quality, but at the cost of that higher production cost. Because we have smaller creators who can bring their idea to life with no pressure on them at all, but a lack of the resources that often give them the ability to move to that next step. Although again, some do break into the next step. That's how you move up the ladder. You have larger creators that have the resources, but have to put things out on a regular basis and just continue to pump out the games. And then you have the premium indie creators that kind of merge the two, but at the cost of making these more premium experiences. And you need everyone. You need all of these creators in the board game market, in the board game industry. You need all these creators because they all provide something different. Without indie creators, you would have everything shifting power to these large companies, and you wouldn't have any innovation in the space. You wouldn't have people being able to bring a dream project, a passion project to life. You have creators. Every single year there's a new creator, multiple new creators that have spent the past 5 years working on their passion project, and something comes out and people's minds are blown at something that was spent so much time, effort, a labor of love. Those things happen, and they happen most often with new creators who manage to break through with something that worked incredibly well. Whether you're talking about something like, Distilled from Pavison Games, whether you're talking about Galactic Cruise, they're from Kins and Key Games. You'll always have, or Slay the Spire, when the Slay the Spire board game came out from a nearly non-existent name, you'll always have those few projects that manage to break through from someone who doesn't have any status as, a creator, practically speaking, but they manage to bring something to life because they manage to persevere past the constraints of an indie creator while not being shackled by the obligations of a larger creator, and they just haven't yet hit the premium indie creator phase. And those companies, by the way, I will say, companies like Pavison, like Kins and Key, those companies tend to be the most primed to then move into that premium indie if they're able to survive and continue to put things out. So you need indie creators for that continued innovation. Once upon a time, Gloomhaven was a premium indie creator, or was an indie creator, I would say, that then became, Cephalofair Games and the behemoth that they are now. But they didn't start that way. You have to start somewhere, and you need innovation. You need indie creators because of that. The flip side is, without big companies, you'll have a ton of innovation, but a ton of lack of quality control. You won't be able to have those reliable, easy to get your hands on, anywhere between $40 to $70 for a board game to just get a good quality Euro game or Ameritrash game, whatever it is you're looking for. Those games that consistently come out from these mid-range companies that have a strong retail presence, consistent, whether it's Board and Dice, whether it's Arcane Wonders, there are so Lucky Duck, there's so many companies that fall into that range of just giving consistent quality to the board game space. Not necessarily the banger that you might get out of Galactic Cruise, but something that is consistent, reliable, and honestly, within those games, there are a lot of games that have really made my top 100 because they are fantastic. And I think the premium indie creators are also not necessarily necessary per se, but they give you this nice almost loyalty aspect from these companies. They're large enough to have a following without so large as to constantly putting out so many games that they lose their voice. They manage to those companies I mentioned, Ship Theory Games, Orange Nebula, Ivy Studios, did I say that one already? Whatever the one, or Shadowborn Games, all those companies and others very much do build up loyal followings around consistent quality and direction. Even something like, Awakened Realms, I find does fall into that kind of, they're a little on the larger side, but they very much do have that premium feel around the types of experiences they put out that very much build brand loyalty around the types of games that they're able to put out. There's no major takeaways for this video. I just thought it was an interesting observation around the natures and constraints on either end of the spectrum, but I do like takeaways. And so as far as takeaways, to whatever extent I can give them, if you're looking for takeaways on this video, is to understand the different things that hold back companies at different points. The next time you're looking at a smaller project from an indie creator and you're thinking it might be a little more expensive than you want, but it does look cool, maybe that's the time to go ahead and back that thing, because maybe that creator could be the next creator who manages to continue to disrupt the playing field and continue to bring quality to your table. I'm not saying back every game that's more expensive than you want to pay, but I'm saying if you're looking at something and it seems like it might be a labor of love, understand the constraints they face around what they have to do to bring it. They almost certainly have their own job and aren't ready to leave their job for several years. They almost certainly are making very little money, if any, on this project, and they just want to bring it to life. And maybe they might be the next creator who moves up a step. The next time you're looking at a larger creator who's pumping out a whole bunch of games, and you're like, dear Lord, why can't company, insert name here, put out good quality games, and I don't feel like I like this one. Remember that, first of all, not every game has to be the best game ever, and not every game is designed for you either. There's so many games that come out every single year, and everyone will have the audience to a certain extent, and there's many new people joining the industry, joining the board game hobby every single year, and to that end, those people don't necessarily have the framework to know that this game they just played isn't the best game ever. They might still be blown away by it. I remember when I first got into the hobby, and the number of games I played that blew my mind, that I look back now and I think, they were good games. If I played them for the first time today, I don't think I'd be quite impressed because I have so many other games in my belt. But not every game is going to be the next thing that blows your mind, and you do need those large established companies to continue to put out consistent quality games so that there's constantly new stuff in print, new blends of different mechanics that you've seen before, some that actually impress, some that are just good, but they're still good even if they're not for you. And the next time you're looking at Ivy Studios putting out an $80 print and play overproduced game. Sorry, Ivy, I couldn't resist. Remember that despite the fact that sometimes these premium companies do have higher price points, the amount of times I've seen someone complaining about the price point of a Chip Theory game, remember that to a certain extent, to be that premium indie creator, to bring that consistent quality to the table without over-stagnating your catalog while also not being shackled by what holds back indie creators, sometimes you do have to have something premium about what you're bringing in a way that might price you out from their offerings, but does allow them to bring something consistent, to build up a fan base, and to bring it to the table. So I guess, as many of my takeaways in many of these videos are, just understanding when something isn't exactly what you want. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.